The blood-red sun dipped below the craggy Wyoming mountains as Rachel Anderson watched her husband's coffin being lowered into the hard, packed earth. The reality of her situation crashing down upon her like the thunderheads gathering on the horizon. Fort Bridger, Wyoming in 1878 was no place for a widow with a failing ranch and a mountain of debt, but Rachel squared her shoulders against the cruel April wind that whipped her black mourning dress around her ankles. This was not the end it couldn't be. My condolences, Mrs. Anderson, Sheriff Mills said, removing his hat as the last shovelful of dirt covered Thomas Anderson's final resting place. Your husband was a good man, Rachel nodded mutely. Thomas had been good, hardworking, kind, ambitious, but his sudden death from pneumonia after being caught in a late winter storm had left her with nothing but memories and problems. At 26, she was alone with a ranch she barely knew how to run, livestock that needed tending, and creditors already circling like vultures. If there's anything I can do. The sheriff offered, but they both knew empty platitudes wouldn't save the Circle a ranch. Thank you, Rachel replied, her voice surprisingly steady. She had cried all her tears during the 3 days Thomas had struggled to breathe before finally succumbing. Now she needed clarity, not sympathy. As the small gathering of neighbors and townspeople began to disperse, Rachel remained rooted beside the fresh grave. The wind carried snippets of conversation, hushed whispers of "poor thing" and "won't last a season," and "Holloway will snatch up that land before summer." She clenched her jaw. James Holloway had been trying to buy the Circle since before she and Thomas had married 4 years ago. The neighboring rancher had made no secret of his desire to expand his already substantial holdings, and Thomas had made no secret of his refusal to sell. Mrs. Anderson. A deep voice interrupted her thoughts. Rachel turned to find Adam James standing a respectful distance away, hat in hand. She knew him only by reputation, a cowhand who had ridden with several outfits in the territory, a man who kept to himself but was known for his skill with horses and his unwavering work ethic. Mr. James, she acknowledged with a slight nod. I worked your north pasture last spring, he explained, his blue eyes direct beneath the brim of his weather-beaten hat. Your husband hired me on for the branding. Rachel vaguely remembered Thomas mentioning the quiet cowboy with the skilled hands. Yes, I recall. I heard in town you might be looking for help. His voice was deep and steady like the mountains themselves. I'm between jobs and could use the work. Rachel studied him. Adam James stood well over 6 feet tall, his frame lean and muscled from years in the saddle. His face was tanned and weathered, with lines at the corners of his eyes that hinted at a man who'd seen his share of hardship. Despite the hard times evident in his appearance, there was something reassuring in his straightforward gaze. Mr. James, I appreciate the offer, but I'm afraid I can't afford to hire anyone right now. The admission stung her pride, but honesty seemed the only currency she had left. The ranch is struggling. I figured as much, he said without judgment. That's why I'm offering my services for room, board, and a small share if we turn things around. Rachel blinked in surprise. That's very generous, but I'm not sure there will be anything to share. Thomas left debts, and with the cattle we lost in the late storms. She trailed off, unwilling to enumerate her problems to a virtual stranger. Adam nodded. I understand the situation better than you might think, Mrs. Anderson. I've seen good ranches go under after one bad season or one piece of bad luck. He glanced at the fresh grave and then back to her. But I've also seen what determination and hard work can do. Rachel felt a flicker of something, not hope exactly, but perhaps its distant cousin. Why would you take such a risk, Mr. James? You don't know me. I knew your husband, he said simply. He was fair with me when others weren't. Besides, he added with the hint of a smile, I've got nowhere pressing to be, and you look like you could use a hand. The practical part of Rachel's mind, the part that had been calculating angles and possibilities, since the doctor had confirmed Thomas wouldn't recover, told her to accept. One man wouldn't save the ranch, but it might buy her time to figure out what to do next. I can offer you the bunkhouse and meals, she said finally, but I can't promise anything beyond that. Adam settled his hat back on his head. "That'll do for a start, Mrs. Anderson." "Rachel," she corrected, offering her gloved hand. "If you're going to help save my ranch, you might as well use my name." His large, calloused hand enveloped hers briefly. "Adam," he returned, "and we're not just going to save it, Rachel, we're going to rebuild it." The confidence in his voice nearly made her believe it was possible. The following morning dawned cold and clear. Rachel rose before the sun, as she had every day since marrying Thomas. The routine was comforting, lighting the stove, putting coffee on to boil, mixing biscuit dough. For a moment, she could almost pretend nothing had changed, that Thomas would come stomping in from the barn, complaining about the unseasonable cold and demanding his breakfast. The illusion shattered when she glanced at his empty chair. Grief hit her anew, a physical ache beneath her ribs. Rachel gripped the edge of the table, allowing herself 3 deep breaths before straightening. She had no time for mourning today. A knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. Adam stood on the porch, hat in hand, already dusty from morning chores. "Morning," he said. "Hope I'm not disturbing you, but I wanted to go over what needs doing most urgently." Rachel gestured him inside. "Coffee's hot." Adam stepped through the doorway, his presence immediately filling the small kitchen. He moved with a surprising grace for such a large man, settling at the table only after she nodded toward a chair. "I've fed the horses and checked on the remaining cattle," he reported after taking a sip of coffee. "You've got about 40 head left in the south pasture that look healthy enough. Another 20 or so scattered in the hills that I'll round up today if I can." That few, Rachel's heart sank. They'd had nearly 100 before the harsh winter. Adam's expression remained neutral. "It's not ideal, but it's enough to build back from if we're smart about it." Rachel took a seat across from him, cradling her coffee cup. "Thomas had plans to sell half the herd this spring to cover our loan from the bank. Without those cattle—" She didn't need to finish the thought. "When's the note due?" Adam asked. "1st of June. 6 weeks from now." He nodded, processing this information. "And Holloway's been making offers." Rachel's eyes narrowed. "How did you know about that?" "Small territory, people talk." Adam shrugged. "Is his offer fair?" "It might cover the bank note," Rachel admitted, "but not much more. Certainly not enough to start over elsewhere, and Thomas loved this land. He poured everything into it." "Then we don't sell," Adam said firmly. "Not yet, anyway." "We might not have a choice," Rachel countered. She'd lain awake most of the night running calculations in her head. "Even if we rounded up every stray head of cattle, the numbers don't add up." Adam leaned forward, his blue eyes intense. "There are other ways to make money, Rachel. The sawmill in town is hiring. The stage line needs fresh horses. We can take odd jobs, repair fences for neighboring ranches." "We?" The word caught her by surprise. "I said I'd help, didn't I?" A smile briefly transformed his face, softening the hard lines. "Besides, I've never been one to walk away from a challenge." Rachel studied him, trying to understand his motivation. "You hardly know me or this place. Why fight so hard for it?" Adam's gaze shifted to the window, where the first rays of sunlight were painting the distant mountains gold. "Because sometimes a piece of land becomes more than dirt and grass. It becomes home." He looked back at her. "Your husband understood that. I reckon you do too." The simple truth of his words resonated with Rachel. The Circle wasn't just a ranch, it was the future she and Thomas had dreamed of building together. Letting it go would mean losing that dream as well as her husband. "All right," she said finally. "Where do we start?" Adam's expression grew serious. "With the truth. I need to know exactly what we're facing, every debt, every asset, every problem." Rachel hesitated only a moment before rising to retrieve Thomas's ledger from the small desk in the corner. She'd avoided looking at it since his death, knowing the numbers wouldn't have magically improved. Spreading the worn book on the table between them, Rachel began the painful accounting of her situation. The bank loan, the outstanding bills at the mercantile, the seed they still needed to purchase for the small vegetable garden that supplemented their income, the repairs needed for the windmill that pumped water to the cattle troughs. Adam listened without interruption, occasionally making notes on a scrap of paper. His face remained impassive, but Rachel could see his mind working, calculating, planning. It's worse than I thought, she concluded finally. If you want to reconsider your offer, I would understand. Adam shook his head. I've seen worse odds. Have you seen them beaten? The ghost of a smile touched his lips, once or twice. For the first time since Thomas had fallen ill, Rachel felt something like hope stir within her. It was fragile, barely there, but present nonetheless. Then I guess we'd better get to work, she said, closing the ledger with newfound determination. Adam rose, settling his hat back on his head. I'll start by rounding up those strays. Might take a couple of days. I'll come with you, Rachel decided, ignoring his look of surprise. I'm a fair hand with a horse and we'll cover more ground together. Your husband never mentioned you could ride, Adam remarked. Rachel allowed herself a small smile. There's a lot about me my husband never mentioned, Mr. James. The next several days fell into a rhythm of exhausting work from dawn until dusk. True to her word, Rachel proved herself capable in the saddle, though Adam noticed her wincing by the end of each long day. They combed the hills and valleys of the Circle A, gradually increasing their herd count to nearly 70 head of cattle, still far fewer than needed, but better than they'd initially feared. In the evenings, they would sit at the kitchen table, Rachel cooking simple meals while Adam went over his plans for saving the ranch. His ideas were practical but ambitious. Repairing the north pasture fence to open up better grazing land, negotiating with the mercantile owner to work off their debt through labor, finding buyers willing to pay premium prices for their limited stock. If we can hold on until fall, Adam explained one evening over a plate of beans and cornbread, cattle prices should rise enough to give us some breathing room. Rachel nodded, her face drawn with fatigue but her eyes clear and focused. And in the meantime? In the meantime, we rebuild what we can and maintain what we have. Adam pushed away his empty plate. Starting with that barn roof tomorrow, another heavy rain and we'll lose half our hay storage. I saw Holloway in town today, Rachel said quietly, changing the subject. He offered his condolences, then immediately asked if I'd reconsidered his offer. Adam's jaw tightened. What did you tell him? That the Circle isn't for sale. A hint of defiance colored her voice. He didn't take it well, said I should be realistic about my situation as a woman alone. You're not alone, Adam said, the words coming out more forcefully than he'd intended. Rachel's eyes met his across the table, surprise registering briefly before she looked away. No, she agreed softly. I suppose I'm not. An awkward silence settled between them, filled with unspoken complications. Adam cleared his throat and stood to help clear the dishes, conscious of the boundary lines they both carefully maintained. Rachel was his employer, recently widowed, and vulnerable despite her strength. His job was to help her save her ranch, not complicate her life further. We should turn in early, he said, keeping his tone businesslike. Tomorrow's going to be another long day, Rachel nodded, accepting the change in mood. I'll have breakfast ready at first light. Adam retreated to the bunkhouse, the night air cool against his face as he crossed the yard. Inside the sparse but clean quarters, he removed his boots and stretched out on the narrow bed, staring at the ceiling beams in the darkness. It had been nearly 2 weeks since Thomas Anderson's funeral, and in that time, Adam had begun to understand why the man had fought so hard for this particular piece of Wyoming. The Circle wasn't the largest spread, nor the most profitable, but it had good water, decent grazing, and the kind of beauty that snuck up on a person, revealing itself in morning mist rising from the creek or evening sunlight gilding the rocky outcroppings above the north pasture. The land had character, just like its determined owner. Rachel Anderson was not what Adam had expected. Thomas had spoken of her occasionally during the branding season. Adam had worked there always with affection, but also with a certain protective condescension. My Rachel's a fine woman, he'd say, but delicate. City-raised, I try to keep the harsher realities of ranch life from troubling her. The woman Adam was coming to know was anything but delicate. Tired, yes. Grieving, certainly. But beneath those layers was a core of resilience that reminded Adam of good steel, flexible enough to bend without breaking, strong enough to bear heavy loads. Sleep came slowly that night, his mind full of calculations, plans, and increasingly of Rachel's determined blue eyes. The following weeks brought both progress and setbacks. They repaired the barn roof just in time for 3 days of driving rain that turned the ranch yard into a sea of mud. The vegetable garden Rachel had planted began to show promising shoots, only to be ravaged by rabbits when a section of fencing collapsed during a windstorm. Each victory seemed matched by a new challenge, testing their resolve daily. Through it all, Adam and Rachel worked side by side, their initial employer-employee formality gradually softening into something like partnership. She never complained, even when her hands blistered from unaccustomed labor. He never questioned her decisions, even when he might have chosen differently. They developed a wordless communication born of shared purpose and growing respect. May was nearly half gone when disaster struck again. Adam returned from town with supplies to find Rachel frantically trying to save a heifer struggling to deliver her first calf. The animal was in distress, bellowing in pain, the calf positioned wrong for a natural birth. How long? Adam asked, immediately stripping off his coat and rolling up his sleeves. Hours, Rachel said, her face streaked with dirt and tears of frustration. I've tried everything I know, but I can't turn the calf. Adam assessed the situation with grim focus. We might lose them both, he warned, but I'll try. What followed was a brutal test of strength and determination. Adam worked with a gentle but firm hand, his large frame tense with effort as he attempted to reposition the calf within the heifer's womb. Rachel assisted without being asked, anticipating his needs, passing tools, offering encouragement to both Adam and the suffering animal. After what seemed an eternity, Adam managed to adjust the calf's position enough to begin guiding it out. Pull now, he instructed Rachel, his voice strained. Together, they eased the newborn calf into the world, a miracle of slick hide and gangly limbs that seemed more dead than alive. The heifer collapsed in exhaustion while Rachel immediately set to cleaning the calf's nose and mouth. Come on, little one, she murmured, rubbing its chest vigorously. Breathe for me. Adam tended to the mother, his hands gentle as he checked for further complications. When he glanced over at Rachel, he saw the calf give a shuddering breath and twitch its legs. That's it, Rachel encouraged, relief breaking across her face like sunrise. That's it. The calf struggled to raise its head, instinct driving it to seek nourishment. With Rachel's help, it eventually found its feet and tottered to its mother's side. Will they be all right? Rachel asked, watching the pair with anxious eyes. Adam nodded, exhaustion evident in every line of his body. I think so, we got lucky. We made our own luck, Rachel corrected, looking up at him with naked gratitude. Thank you, Adam. I couldn't have done this alone. Something shifted between them in that moment, a recognition of how far they'd come together, how much they'd endured. Adam found himself reaching out to brush a strand of hair from her face, the gesture crossing a boundary he'd carefully maintained. Rachel went still beneath his touch, her eyes widening slightly. For a heartbeat, neither moved, caught in an unexpected current of awareness. Then the heifer lowed softly to her calf, breaking the spell. Rachel stepped back, suddenly conscious of how close they were standing. I should get some water for her, she said, her voice slightly unsteady. Adam nodded, letting his hand fall back to his side. And I need to check the rest of the herd. They parted ways, each retreating to the safety of necessary tasks, but Adam carried the memory of that unguarded moment with him throughout the day. It troubled him more than he cared to admit, not because it had happened, but because he wanted it to happen again. That night, Adam skipped the usual evening meal in the main house, choosing instead to eat a cold supper in the bunkhouse and turn in early. Confusion and a sense of impropriety kept him awake long after the ranch had fallen silent. Rachel was Thomas Anderson's widow. The ranch was her inheritance, her responsibility. Adam was there to help her keep it, not to complicate matters with inappropriate feelings. Once the immediate crisis passed, once the ranch was secure, he would move on as he always had. That had been the arrangement from the beginning. Yet as he finally drifted towards sleep, Adam found himself wondering what it would be like to stay, to build something permanent for the first time in his 32 years. The thought was both tantalizing and terrifying. Morning brought no clarity, only more work and the looming deadline of the bank note. With just 2 weeks remaining before payment was due, Adam redoubled his efforts. He took odd jobs in town, repairing the livery stable's corral and helping the blacksmith with a backlog of horseshoeing. Rachel sold eggs and butter to the hotel restaurant, using the meager proceeds to purchase essential supplies. Every penny earned went into a tin box Rachel kept on the high shelf in the kitchen cupboard. Every evening they counted the contents, tracking their slow progress toward the amount needed to satisfy the bank. "We're still short by more than half," Rachel observed one night in late May, her voice tight with worry. "Even if we sell 5 head of cattle at premium prices, we won't make enough." Adam studied the neat columns of figures in the ledger. "What about selling the south quarter section? It's mostly rocky ground anyway, not much good for grazing." Rachel shook her head. "That land contains the best spring on the property. Sell that and we lose our water rights." "Holloway knows it too. It's why he wants the whole ranch, not pieces." Adam ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "There has to be another way." They sat in silence, both staring at the insufficient numbers as if willing them to change. Finally, Rachel closed the ledger with a decisive snap. "There is another way," she said, her voice taking on a new determination. "I'm going to speak with Mr. Keller at the bank tomorrow, ask for an extension." "Banks aren't known for their charity," Adam cautioned. "No, but they are known for preferring partial payment to foreclosure." Rachel's chin lifted in that stubborn way Adam had come to recognize. "And I'm prepared to offer Mr. Keller something in addition to our partial payment." Adam's brow furrowed. "What?" "My mother's jewelry," Rachel said simply. "I have a few pieces that are quite valuable. I've been saving them as a last resort." "Rachel, no, those are your heirlooms." She met his concerned gaze steadily. "This ranch was Thomas's dream, but it's become mine too. I won't lose it without fighting with everything I have." Adam wanted to protest further, to offer some alternative solution, but he recognized the futility of arguing with her once her mind was set. Instead, he nodded slowly. "I'll go with you." "You don't have to, I know," he interrupted gently. "But we're in this together, aren't we?" The question hung between them, loaded with meaning that extended beyond their business arrangement. Rachel's expression softened, vulnerability briefly replacing her practical determination. "Yes," she agreed softly, "we are." The next morning, they rode into Fort Bridger together, the small velvet pouch containing Rachel's precious heirlooms tucked securely in her saddlebag. The town was busier than usual, wagons and riders crowding the main street as they prepared for the annual Founders' Day celebration that weekend. "Wait here," Rachel instructed as they reached the bank. "This might take some convincing." Adam watched her square her shoulders and walk into the imposing brick building with the same courage she'd shown facing down every other challenge. Pride and something deeper stirred in his chest. While waiting, Adam took the opportunity to inquire about additional work at the general store. The owner, Mr. Bennett, had become something of an ally in their struggle, extending credit when he could and often slipping extra supplies into their orders. "Nothing steady," the storekeeper reported regretfully, "but the Rawlings farm needs help bringing in their early hay. Might be worth asking." Adam thanked him and was heading toward the livery to check on another potential job when he spotted James Holloway emerging from the saloon. The rancher caught sight of him at the same moment, his expression hardening as he changed course to intercept Adam. "James," Adam acknowledged coolly. "Something I can help you with?" Holloway was a big man with the florid complexion of someone who enjoyed his whiskey more than was prudent. His expensive clothes and gold watch chain marked him as one of the territory's most successful cattlemen. "Heard you've been playing hero out at the Anderson place," Holloway remarked, a sneer evident beneath his carefully groomed mustache. "Wasting your time, cowboy. That spread's been circling the drain since before Thomas caught his death." Adam's expression remained neutral despite the anger simmering beneath the surface. "The Circle A's doing just fine," Holloway laughed, the sound lacking any genuine humor. "Is that what the widow's telling you?" Must be quite the arrangement you two have worked out. The insinuation was clear, and Adam's hands curled into fists at his sides. You do well to watch your mouth when speaking of Mrs. Anderson. Touched a nerve, did I? Holloway's smile widened unpleasantly. Listen, James, I'm a reasonable man. The Anderson place is going to be mine one way or another. The bank note's coming due, and word is they're not even close to meeting it. Your information's outdated, Adam replied evenly. Holloway's eyes narrowed. Tell you what, when the widow's ready to face reality, tell her my offer still stands, but the price drops every week she makes me wait. Adam stepped closer, his voice low but carrying an unmistakable warning. Mrs. Anderson isn't selling, not to you, not to anyone. We'll see about that, Holloway retorted, his hand reflexively moving toward his hip before he caught himself. Just remember, you're backing a losing horse, Cowboy. Before Adam could respond, Rachel emerged from the bank, her expression unreadable as she took in the confrontation playing out on the boardwalk. Holloway's demeanor immediately changed, his face arranging itself into a mask of sympathetic concern. Mrs. Anderson, he called, tipping his hat. Just the lady I was hoping to see. I was expressing my condolences to your hired hand here. Rachel approached, her spine straight as a ramrod. Mr. Holloway, she acknowledged coldly, I believe we've said all that needs saying between us. Now, don't be hasty, Holloway cajoled. Times are hard for a woman alone. I'm only trying to offer you a practical solution to your troubles. I'm managing my troubles quite well, Rachel replied, and as you can see, I'm not alone. Holloway's gaze flicked between Rachel and Adam, calculation evident in his small eyes. The bank giving you an extension, then? The slight falter in Rachel's composure told Adam what he needed to know even before she answered. My business with the bank is my own concern, Mr. Holloway. Of course, Holloway agreed with false solicitude. Just remember my offer when things get desperate, though I should warn you land values are dropping all over the territory. He touched his hat brim again and sauntered away, leaving an unpleasant silence in his wake. Adam turned to Rachel, noting the tight set of her mouth and the worry lines between her brows. How did it go? He asked quietly. She waited until they had moved away from curious ears before responding. Mr. Keller was unmoved by my request for an extension, even with the jewelry. Rachel nodded, her expression bleak. He said the pieces would need proper appraisal, which could take weeks, and even then the value might not be sufficient. She drew a shaky breath. He gave me until the 1st of June, as agreed, not a day more. Adam absorbed this setback, his mind already working through alternatives. Then we sell cattle, he decided. More than we planned, we can rebuild the herd later. That still won't be enough, Rachel said, frustration evident in her voice. You know the numbers as well as I do. They reached their horses, and Adam helped Rachel mount before swinging into his own saddle. As they rode out of town, he considered options they hadn't yet explored, including some he'd hoped to avoid. I might have one more card to play, he said finally, as the town fell behind them. Rachel looked over at him, hope and wariness mingling in her expression. What kind of card? Adam hesitated, weighing how much to reveal. I have some money saved, not much, but maybe enough to make up the difference. Adam, no. Rachel reined her horse to a stop, forcing him to do the same. I can't let you do that. This isn't your fight, isn't it? He met her gaze steadily. I've put weeks of sweat into that land. I've doctored its cattle, mended its fences, patched its roof. Seems to me I've earned some say in what happens to it. Rachel studied him, confusion evident in her furrowed brow. Why would you invest your savings in a ranch that isn't yours? That might still fail despite our best efforts. The question hung between them on the dusty road, demanding a truth Adam wasn't sure he was ready to voice. He looked away toward the distant mountains where clouds were gathering for an afternoon storm. Maybe I'm tired of drifting, he said finally. Maybe I want to build something that lasts. And the circle is that something? Rachel pressed, not allowing him to hide behind vague statements. Adam looked back at her, taking in her wind-reddened cheeks, the tendrils of auburn hair that had escaped her practical bun, the intelligence and determination in her blue eyes. In that moment, he realized with startling clarity that the ranch itself was only part of what he wanted to build. "It could be," he answered carefully. "With the right partner." Rachel's eyes widened slightly as his meaning registered. A flush that had nothing to do with the wind crept up her neck. "Adam, I'm not asking for anything," he assured her quickly. "It's too soon, and you've got enough to worry about without me complicating matters. I'm just explaining why I'm willing to invest in the Circle A." Rachel was quiet for a long moment, her gaze thoughtful as she considered his words. Finally, she nudged her horse forward again, resuming their journey home. It's a significant if we accept your money," she said after they'd ridden in silence for several minutes. "It would be as an investment, not a gift. You'd be a partial owner of the Circle A, entitled to a proportional share of any future profits." It wasn't the response Adam had been expecting. He'd anticipated either outright refusal or uncomfortable gratitude. Instead, Rachel had offered him a business proposition and perhaps, though she hadn't said it directly, a reason to stay. "That seems fair," he agreed, careful to keep his tone neutral despite the spark of hope her words had kindled. "Good," Rachel said with a brisk nod. "We'll draw up the papers when we get back to the ranch." As they rode, the gathering storm finally broke, forcing them to urge their horses to a faster pace. By the time they reached the Circle A, rain was falling in earnest, turning the yard to mud and drumming on the newly repaired barn roof. They stabled the horses quickly, working together with the efficient partnership they'd developed over the past weeks. When they made a dash for the house, Rachel slipped in the mud, and Adam caught her instinctively, his hands steady at her waist. For a moment they stood frozen in the pouring rain, Rachel's hands braced against his chest, her face tilted up to his. Water streamed down their faces, soaking their clothes, but neither moved to break the contact. "Rachel," Adam said, his voice barely audible above the storm. Something shifted in her expression, a decision made, a barrier lowered. "I think," she said softly, "that we should get out of this rain." The practical words contrasted with the look in her eyes, sending a current of awareness through Adam's body. He released her slowly, nodding his agreement. Inside the kitchen, Rachel bustled about lighting lamps and stoking the fire while Adam removed his dripping hat and coat. The sudden warmth after the cold rain made steam rise from their wet clothing. "You should change before you catch your death," Rachel advised, her back to him as she put water on to boil. "So should you," Adam replied, noting how her sodden dress clung to her slender frame. Rachel turned, a strange vulnerability in her expression that had nothing to do with her wet clothes. "Adam, what you said earlier about building something that lasts." She hesitated, seeming to search for words. "I need you to know that I'm still mourning Thomas. I loved him and I miss him every day." Adam nodded, respecting her honesty. "I know." But Rachel continued, her voice gaining strength. "I also know that life here is uncertain and often short. Thomas taught me that much with his passing." She took a steadying breath. "What I'm trying to say, rather poorly, is that I value what we're building together, the partnership, the trust. And I'm not opposed to seeing where it might lead, given time." The simple declaration, delivered with Rachel's characteristic straightforwardness, affected Adam more deeply than any flowery confession of feelings might have. It acknowledged reality, her grief, their uncertain circumstances, while leaving room for possibility. "Time is something I'm willing to give," Adam said quietly. "And something tells me this ranch is going to need both of us for quite a while yet." A smile touched Rachel's lips, transforming her tired face. "Then I suppose we'd better make sure we keep it." The next day, they rode to the cattle buyer in the next town, securing a price for 12 head that was lower than they'd hoped, but still represented progress toward their goal. When combined with their previous savings and Adam's contribution, which Rachel insisted on documenting as an investment rather than a loan, they were within striking distance of the amount needed to satisfy the bank. "We're still short," Rachel observed as they updated the ledger that evening. "But not by much. We'll find a way," Adam assured her. The opportunity came in an unexpected form 2 days later. Adam was repairing the pasture gate when Sheriff Mills rode up, dust from the trail coating his usually neat appearance. James, the sheriff greeted him. Good to catch you. Is Mrs. Anderson around, in the house? Adam replied, wiping his hands on his bandana. Something wrong, not wrong exactly. Mills dismounted, leading his horse to the water trough. Army's looking for remounts. Cavalry needs fresh horses for a patrol heading up to the Yellowstone country. They're offering good prices, cash on the barrel. Adam frowned. The Circle doesn't have horses to sell, just a few work animals. That roan stallion in your corral suggests otherwise, Mills observed with a knowing look. Word is you've got away with difficult horses. Army doesn't care about perfect manners, just sound legs and good stamina. The roan stallion was Adam's personal mount, a half-wild creature he gentled himself 2 years earlier. The horse was fast, strong, and responsive to Adam's commands, though he remained suspicious of strangers. He was also worth considerably more than an ordinary saddle horse. When does the Army need an answer? Adam asked, already calculating what the stallion might bring at a fair price. Tomorrow noon, Mills replied. They're camped at the fort, leaving the next day. Adam nodded. I'll talk to Mrs. Anderson. Rachel listened to the proposition with a thoughtful expression. It's your horse, Adam, your decision. It's our ranch, he countered. And that horse could be the difference between keeping it and losing it. Rachel's eyes softened at his use of our, but she remained practical. You'd need another mount. The work here requires a reliable horse. I can break one of the younger geldings, Adam said. It's not ideal, but it's doable. Rachel studied him, understanding the sacrifice he was contemplating. The roan wasn't just transportation, he was Adam's partner in the saddle, a companion who'd carried him across thousands of miles. Are you sure? She asked softly. Adam glanced out the window toward the corral where the stallion was tossing his head, his red coat gleaming in the afternoon sun. Yes, he said finally, I'm sure. The following day, Adam rode the roan to Fort Bridger, where the Army Cavalry Detachment was preparing for their journey north. The commanding officer, a no-nonsense captain named Barton, inspected the stallion with an expert eye. Spirited animal, he observed as the horse pranced nervously in the fort's parade ground. Best mount I've ever had, Adam acknowledged. Fast, sure-footed, and he can go all day. The captain nodded. How much? Adam named a figure that was ambitious but not unreasonable. Captain Barton countered with a lower offer. After some negotiation, they settled on a price that would, when combined with their existing funds, cover the bank note with a small margin to spare. As the Army horse handler took the roan's reins, Adam felt a pang of regret. He stroked the stallion's neck one last time, murmuring quiet words of farewell to the animal who had been his most constant companion for years. The handler gave him an understanding look. I'll take good care of him, mister. Cavalry treats its horses right. Adam nodded his appreciation and stepped back, watching as the roan was led away to join the other Army mounts. The sacrifice stung, but as he pocketed the payment enough to secure the future of the Circle, he felt a surprising sense of peace. For the first time in his life, he had chosen to put down roots rather than maintain the freedom to ride away at a moment's notice. The ride back to the ranch on a borrowed mount was slow, giving Adam plenty of time to reflect on how much had changed in the 6 weeks since Thomas Anderson's funeral. He'd come to the Circle looking for temporary work and found something he hadn't even realized he was seeking, a purpose, a place, and perhaps even a partner to share them with. Rachel was waiting on the porch when he returned, her face anxious until she saw his expression. You sold him, she stated rather than asked. Adam nodded, dismounting stiffly from the unfamiliar saddle. Got a fair price, too. Rachel descended the porch steps to meet him, her eyes searching his face. Are you all right? The simple question, laden with genuine concern, touched something deep within Adam. I will be, he answered honestly. It was time for a change anyway. Rachel surprised him by reaching out to squeeze his hand briefly. Thank you, she said, her voice thick with emotion. I know what that horse meant to you. Adam looked down at their joined hands. Some things matter more. The moment stretched between them, fragile and charged with unspoken feelings. Then Rachel straightened, returning to her practical self. Supper's nearly ready. And I've been working on something I want to show you afterward. Curious, Adam followed her into the house, where the savory smell of rabbit stew filled the kitchen. They ate with the comfortable familiarity of people who had shared 100 meals together, discussing the day's work and plans for the next morning when they would ride into town to pay the bank note. After the dishes were cleared, Rachel retrieved several sheets of paper from the desk drawer. "I've been drafting these since we returned from town yesterday," she explained, spreading them on the table. "Partnership papers." Adam looked down at the neatly written document, surprised by the thoroughness of the legal language. "Where did you learn to draw up contracts?" A smile touched Rachel's lips. "My father was a lawyer in St. Louis before he died. He insisted I understand basic legal principles, said a woman should never be at a disadvantage in business matters." Adam read through the document carefully. It outlined a clear partnership structure for the Circle Ranch, with Rachel maintaining majority ownership, but Adam receiving a quarter share in recognition of his financial investment and ongoing labor. Profits would be divided proportionally after operating expenses, and major decisions would require mutual agreement. "This is more than fair," he said when he'd finished reading. "Are you certain this is what you want?" Rachel met his gaze steadily. "I am. The circle needs both of us, Adam." "I've come to believe that." There was something in her voice, a warmth that suggested she might be speaking of more than just ranch operations. Adam didn't press the point, however. There would be time for those conversations later, once the immediate crisis had passed. "Then I accept," he said, reaching for the pen she offered. They signed the documents in turn, Rachel's neat signature beside Adam's more rugged scrawl. As they blotted the ink, Adam felt the weight of the moment, a drifter putting down roots, a widow rebuilding her life. Both taking a chance on an uncertain future. "Partners," Rachel said softly, offering her hand across the table. Adam took it, feeling the calluses that had formed over the past weeks of hard work. "Partners," he agreed. The next morning dawned bright and clear, a perfect early June day as they rode into Fort Bridger. The bank was their first stop, where Mr. Keller received their payment with poorly concealed surprise. "This settles your account in full, Mrs. Anderson," he acknowledged, stamping the loan document as paid. "I must admit I had my doubts." "So we gathered," Rachel replied with cool dignity. "I trust you'll inform Mr. Holloway that the circle remains in Anderson hands." The banker's expression confirmed their suspicion that Holloway had been expecting to acquire the property through foreclosure. "Business matters between the bank and other clients are confidential, Mrs. Anderson." "Of course," Rachel agreed with a knowing smile. "Just as I'm sure our successful repayment will be equally confidential." As they left the bank, Adam couldn't help but admire the quiet strength Rachel displayed. She had faced down skeptics, weathered personal tragedy, and worked herself to exhaustion to save her home. The woman who had once been described as delicate had proven herself to be anything but. "What now?" Adam asked as they stood on the boardwalk, the June sun warm on their faces. Rachel looked around the busy town, then back at him with a hint of mischief in her eyes. "Now, Mr. James, I believe we celebrate. The Founders' Day dance is tonight, and for the first time in months I feel like dancing." The suggestion caught Adam by surprise. "Are you sure that's appropriate, given your mourning period?" A shadow passed over Rachel's face. "Thomas has been gone nearly 2 months. In frontier terms, that's practically an eternity." Her expression softened. "He wouldn't have wanted me to live in black crepe forever, Adam. He loved life too much for that." Adam nodded, understanding her reasoning but still concerned about town gossip. "People will talk. People always talk," Rachel said dismissively. "They've probably been talking since the day you moved into my bunkhouse. I can't control their tongues, but I can decide whether to live my life according to their expectations or my own needs." Her frankness startled a laugh from Adam. "When you put it that way, I'd be honored to escort you to the dance, Mrs. Anderson." They spent the remainder of the day on pleasant errands purchasing supplies, speaking with the smithy about a new plowshare, and even indulging in small personal luxuries with their remaining funds. Rachel bought a length of blue calico that matched her eyes, and Adam found a new hat to replace his weather-beaten one. As evening approached, they returned to the ranch to prepare for the dance. Adam washed and shaved with special care, donning his best shirt somewhat worn but clean and his least scuffed boots. As he walked from the bunkhouse to the main house, he felt an uncharacteristic nervousness flutter in his stomach. The feeling intensified when Rachel opened the door. She had transformed the practical blue calico into a simple but becoming dress, its color enhancing the auburn highlights in her dark hair, which she had arranged in a softer style than her usual severe bun. A small cameo at her throat, perhaps one of her mother's pieces that the banker had rejected, completed the picture. "You look." Adam searched for an appropriate word and settled on simple truth. "Beautiful." A blush touched Rachel's cheeks. "Thank you, you clean up rather well yourself." The ride to town was filled with an anticipatory energy neither chose to acknowledge directly. The community hall was already bustling when they arrived, lanterns glowing against the early evening sky and the sounds of a fiddle and piano spilling from the open doors. Inside, the hall had been transformed with bunting and flowers. Nearly everyone from Fort Bridger and the surrounding ranches had turned out for the celebration, creating a sea of color and movement on the dance floor. Rachel's appearance in her blue dress, escorted by Adam, caused a predictable ripple of whispers. Widows in mourning weren't expected to attend social functions, let alone dances. But several of the ranch wives who had come to know Rachel during her struggles approached to welcome her, their genuine warmth helping to ease the initial awkwardness. "Pay them no mind," Mrs. Bennett, the storekeeper's wife, advised when she noticed Rachel's awareness of the whispers. "Half of them are just jealous you've got the handsomest cowboy in the territory on your arm." Rachel's blush deepened, but she lifted her chin with characteristic determination. "Thank you, Mrs. Bennett." As the evening progressed, the initial discomfort faded. Adam and Rachel danced several sets together, their movements becoming more natural and in sync with each turn around the floor. During a lively reel, Adam caught sight of James Holloway watching them from the edge of the room, his expression dark with displeasure. The rancher lifted his whiskey glass in a mock salute when he noticed Adam's attention, then turned away. "Ignore him," Rachel murmured, having followed Adam's gaze. "Tonight isn't about Holloway or the ranch or any of our troubles. Tonight is for celebrating what we've accomplished." Adam smiled down at her, admiring her ability to live in the moment despite all they'd endured. "You're right," he agreed, spinning her into another turn as the fiddle picked up tempo. Later, as the music slowed for a waltz, Adam hesitated. The more intimate dance would make a statement to the watching community, one he wasn't sure Rachel was ready to make. "We don't have to," he offered, giving her a chance to decline. Rachel considered for only a moment before placing her hand in his. "I'd like to," she said simply. As Adam guided her onto the floor, one hand at her waist and the other clasping hers, he felt a profound sense of rightness. Rachel moved with natural grace, following his lead as they circled the floor in perfect harmony. "I never asked where you learned to dance," Rachel remarked, looking up at him with curiosity. "It doesn't seem a typical cowboy accomplishment." Adam smiled slightly. "My mother insisted, said no son of hers would grow up without knowing how to properly escort a lady." "She taught you well," Rachel observed. "Where is she now, your mother?" "Passed on 10 years ago," Adam replied, the old grief a distant ache. "Influenza took her and my sister both in the same week." Rachel's eyes filled with sympathy. "I'm sorry." "It was a long time ago," Adam said. "But thank you." As they continued to dance, Adam found himself sharing more of his past than he had with anyone in years. His childhood in Kansas, his father's death in a farming accident when Adam was 16, his years of drifting from ranch to ranch across the Western Territories. Rachel listened with genuine interest, offering pieces of her own history in return: her sheltered upbringing in St. Louis, her parents' deaths that left her an orphaned heiress, her marriage to Thomas, who had been her father's legal clerk. "It wasn't a grand passion," she admitted as they stepped outside for some air after several dances. The night was cool but pleasant, stars blanketing the Wyoming sky. Thomas was kind and steady, and I was alone in the world. When he proposed moving west to start a ranch, it seemed like an adventure. Did you regret it? Adam asked, genuinely curious about the city-bred woman who had adapted so thoroughly to frontier life. Rachel considered the question seriously. There were difficult moments, she acknowledged. The isolation was harder than I expected, the work never ending, the weather more extreme. She smiled slightly. But no, I never regretted it. There's something about this land that gets under your skin. That it does, Adam agreed, looking out at the silhouettes of the distant mountains against the night sky. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment before Rachel spoke again, her voice softer. I've been thinking about what you said before about building something that lasts. Adam turned to face her, heart quickening at her serious expression. And I think maybe we've already started, Rachel said, meeting his gaze directly. The partnership, the ranch, the trust between us, it feels like a foundation. The simple honesty of her words moved Adam deeply. In a world where men and women often danced around their feelings with elaborate social conventions, Rachel's straightforwardness was refreshing and brave. A good foundation, Adam agreed, his voice husky with emotion. Strong enough to build on if that's what you want. Rachel stepped closer, close enough that he could see the play of lantern light and shadow across her face. I think it is, she said softly. Not today or tomorrow. There's still mourning to be done and healing to happen, but someday, Adam, someday soon. The promise in her words was enough. Adam reached out slowly, giving her time to step back if she wished, and brushed a stray curl from her cheek. I'm not going anywhere, Rachel. For the first time in my life, I've found a place worth staying. Rachel's smile illuminated her face, more beautiful than the stars overhead. Then I suppose we should get back to the dance. We have a future to celebrate. As summer settled over the Wyoming territory, the Circle Ranch began to show signs of recovery. The vegetable garden flourished under Rachel's careful tending, providing fresh produce for their table and extra to sell in town. The remaining cattle grew fat on the lush grass of the north pasture, and the new calves, including the one Adam and Rachel had saved together, thrived under their watchful care. Adam broke 2 young geldings to replace his sold stallion, finding satisfaction in the partnership that developed between man and horse. One, a sturdy bay with an intelligent eye, showed particular promise, responding to Adam's gentle but firm training methods with enthusiasm. Rachel continued to surprise him with her adaptability and determination. She learned to mend harnesses under his guidance, improved her riding skills until she could help with even the most demanding cattle work, and maintained meticulous records of their slowly improving finances. They settled into a comfortable routine, working side by side during the day and sharing quiet evenings in the ranch house. Sometimes they would sit on the porch after supper, watching the sunset paint the western sky in brilliant orange and gold. Other nights they would remain at the kitchen table, planning improvements to the ranch or simply talking. Their partnership deepened with each passing week, built on shared work, mutual respect, and the gradual healing of Rachel's grief. She still had moments when memories of Thomas would surface unexpectedly at the sight of his favorite chair or the sound of a tune he used to whistle. But increasingly, those moments came without sharp pain, tempered by time and the growing warmth of her feelings for Adam. For his part, Adam found himself settling into ranch life with surprising contentment. The restlessness that had driven him from place to place for years had eased, replaced by a sense of purpose he'd never experienced before. He belonged at the Circle A, not just as a hired hand or even a business partner, but as a man building a future. Their neighbors and the townspeople of Fort Bridger gradually adjusted to the unusual arrangement at the Circle A. Some still whispered about propriety, but many recognized the practical reality of frontier life. A woman alone couldn't run a ranch, and a respectable partnership made good sense for both parties. James Holloway remained a shadow on the horizon, making no secret of his continued interest in acquiring the Circle A. When cattle prices rose in late summer, he made another offer higher than before, but still below the ranch's true value. Not interested, was Rachel's succinct response when Holloway cornered her outside the general store. The rancher's face darkened. You're being stubborn for no reason, Mrs. Anderson. That cowboy of yours is filling your head with false hope. The circle will never be more than a struggling operation. Rachel stood her ground. Perhaps, but it's our struggling operation, Mr. Holloway, and we're content with it. As she walked away, Holloway called after her, Winter's coming, Mrs. Anderson. Remember that when your fences are buried in snow and your cattle are starving. The encounter troubled Rachel more than she admitted to Adam that evening. He sounded almost threatening, she said as they sat by the fire after supper. Adam considered this. Holloway's used to getting his way. Men like that don't take rejection well. Should we be worried? Rachel asked, genuine concern in her voice. Cautious, Adam decided after a moment's thought. We'll keep a closer eye on the herd, make sure the barn and corral gates are secured at night. He reached over to cover her hand with his. But don't let him frighten you, Rachel. The circle is ours now, and we've earned the right to keep it. The touch of his hand against hers no longer felt strange or improper. Over the summer months, small gestures of affection had become natural between them, a hand at her elbow helping her over rough ground, his fingers brushing hers as they passed tools back and forth, occasional touches that lingered just a moment longer than strictly necessary. They had not discussed the future directly since the night of the Founders' Day dance, both content to let their relationship develop at its own pace. But as September gave way to October, bringing a sharp chill to the morning air and the first hints of gold to the aspen trees in the hills, Adam began to sense a change in their comfortable patterns. Rachel seemed more contemplative, sometimes watching him when she thought he wasn't looking, her expression thoughtful. She took more care with her appearance, wearing her hair in the softer style she'd adopted for the dance rather than the severe bun of early widowhood. Once, he returned from checking the north pasture to find her pressing her best dress, the blue calico she'd worn only for church services since the Founders' Day celebration. "Are we expecting company?" Adam asked, surprised by the domestic scene. Rachel looked up, a flush of color touching her cheeks. "No, I just thought it might be nice to mark the occasion." "Occasion?" Adam repeated, puzzled. "It's been 6 months today since Thomas died," Rachel said quietly. "Half a year of managing on our own, rebuilding what was broken." Adam nodded, understanding dawning. A milestone worth acknowledging. "Yes," Rachel agreed, resuming her ironing with careful attention. "I thought perhaps we might have a special supper tonight. I've been saving the last jar of preserved peaches for a cobbler." Adam smiled at the simple gesture that meant far more than the words suggested. "I'd like that." That evening, Rachel set the table with her good dishes, a wedding present rarely used during the hard work of ranch life. She wore the blue dress, and Adam noticed she had pinned the cameo at her throat and arranged her hair with special care. Adam did his part by washing thoroughly and putting on his cleanest shirt. As they sat down to the meal, Rachel had prepared venison roast, fresh vegetables from the garden, and warm bread. He felt the significance of the moment. This wasn't just dinner, it was a ceremony of sorts, marking the end of one chapter and the potential beginning of another. They ate by lamplight, the autumn evening having drawn in early. Their conversation flowed easily, touching on ranch business but also ranging to memories and hopes for the future. Rachel seemed more animated than usual, a soft glow about her that Adam found mesmerizing. After the peach cobbler had been served and enjoyed, they lingered at the table, neither seeming eager to break the special atmosphere of the evening. Finally, Rachel rose and moved to the small shelf where Thomas had kept a bottle of fine whiskey, a luxury saved for special occasions. Thomas would pour a measure of this to celebrate important moments, she explained, returning with the bottle and 2 small glasses. "I think tonight qualifies." Adam accepted the glass she offered, watching as she poured a small amount of amber liquid for each of them. Rachel lifted her glass, her eyes meeting his across the table. "To remembering the past," she said softly, "and embracing the future." Adam nodded, touched by the sentiment. "To the future," he echoed, clinking his glass gently against hers. They sipped the whiskey in companionable silence, the fire crackling in the stove and the wind singing around the eaves of the ranch house. Adam felt a profound sense of contentment combined with anticipation, as if they were standing on the threshold of something important. Rachel seemed to share the feeling. When she spoke again, her voice was quiet but determined. "Adam, there's something I've been wanting to say." He set down his glass, giving her his full attention. "I'm listening." Rachel took a deep breath, her fingers tracing the rim of her whiskey glass. "These past months have been transformative. When Thomas died, I thought everything was ending our dreams, this ranch, my place in the world." She looked up, meeting his gaze directly. "I never expected to find a new beginning in the midst of that ending." Adam's heart quickened at the emotion in her voice. "Rachel," she held up a hand, asking for the chance to finish. "Please let me say this while I have the courage." She set her glass down, her hands now steady and sure. "I've done my mourning, Adam. I'll always honor Thomas's memory, but my heart has healed. More than healed, it's grown in ways I never anticipated." The lamplight caught the gold highlights in her hair as she continued. "What I'm trying to say is that I'm ready to move forward, with the ranch, with my life." She paused, gathering her courage. "With you, if that's still what you want." The simple declaration, delivered with Rachel's characteristic straightforwardness, filled Adam with a warmth that had nothing to do with the whiskey. He reached across the table to take her hand in his. "It is," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "It has been since that day in the rain when you said we would rebuild." Rachel's smile transformed her face, years of worry and grief falling away as she laced her fingers with his. "I think perhaps we were rebuilding more than just the ranch all along." Adam rose, drawing her gently to her feet and around the table until they stood facing each other in the warm circle of lamplight. "Rachel Anderson," he said softly, "I came here looking for temporary work and found a home instead. Not just this land or these buildings, but with you. You are the bravest, most determined woman I've ever known, and I would be honored to share your life if you'll have me." Tears shimmered in Rachel's blue eyes, but her smile never faltered. "Adam James," she responded, her voice steady despite the emotion evident in her face, "I accept your proposal on one condition." Adam raised an eyebrow, a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "And what would that be?" "That we truly are partners in the ranch, in our marriage, in everything," Rachel said seriously. "I've learned too much about my own strength these past months to ever go back to being the delicate wife Thomas thought he needed to protect." Adam's smile broadened into a genuine grin. "I wouldn't have it any other way," he assured her. "The woman I fell in love with can birth a breech calf, negotiate with bankers, and stand toe-to-toe with James Holloway. Why would I want to change that?" Rachel laughed, the sound like music in the quiet house. "When you put it that way." Adam drew her closer, one hand moving to cup her cheek. "May I?" he asked softly. Rachel nodded, her eyes never leaving his as she tilted her face upward. "Please." Their first kiss was gentle, a tentative exploration that quickly deepened as months of unspoken feelings found expression. When they finally drew apart, both were breathless. "I've been wanting to do that since the day we saved that calf together," Adam admitted, his forehead resting against hers. Rachel smiled, her hands still resting on his chest. "I've been hoping you would since the Founders' Day dance." They laughed together, the joy of their new understanding filling the room that had seen so much hardship. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows with the promise of the first autumn storm, but inside the circle, a ranch house, warmth and hope had taken firm root. The news of their engagement spread quickly through Fort Bridger. Most received it with unsurprised approval. The partnership between the widow and the cowboy had been evolving in plain sight for months. A few of the more traditionally minded townspeople muttered about proper mourning periods, but frontier pragmatism generally prevailed over Eastern social conventions. James Holloway was among the few who received the news with open displeasure. "Seems mighty convenient for a drifting cowhand to end up with a ranch and a woman in one fell swoop," he remarked loudly in the saloon one evening. Adam, entering to purchase tobacco, overheard the comment. "Something on your mind, Holloway?" he asked evenly, approaching the rancher's table. Holloway looked up, his expression a mixture of contempt and frustration. Just remarking on your good fortune, James. From saddle tramp to ranch owner in 6 months, quite an accomplishment. Several other patrons shifted uncomfortably, sensing the tension between the two men. Adam remained calm, though his eyes had hardened. I'd be careful about questioning the honor of my future wife, Holloway. Some might take it personally. Take it however you want, Holloway retorted, emboldened by whiskey and lingering resentment over losing the Circle A. Everyone knows what happened. Convenient death, convenient partnership, very neat arrangement. The insinuation hung in the air like gunsmoke. Adam's hands curled into fists at his sides, but he kept his voice level. Thomas Anderson died of pneumonia after being caught in a late spring storm. It was witnessed by the doctor, the sheriff, and half the town. As for the partnership, every legal detail was properly documented and filed. There's nothing convenient about either situation, Holloway sneered. Keep telling yourself that, cowboy. Meanwhile, the rest of us know what we know. Adam took a deliberate step closer, his patience wearing thin. What exactly are you suggesting, Holloway? The saloon had gone quiet, every eye on the confrontation. Sheriff Mills, seated at a corner table, rose cautiously, ready to intervene if necessary. Holloway seemed to realize he'd pushed too far. He lifted his hands in mock surrender. Not suggesting anything, just making conversation. Find another topic, Adam advised coldly. This one's closed. He turned to leave, his original errand forgotten, when Holloway's voice stopped him at the door. By the way, James might want to keep a close eye on your north pasture fencing. Herd wolves have been troublesome up that way. The veiled threat wasn't lost on Adam or anyone else in the saloon. He paused, considering whether to respond, then decided against giving Holloway the satisfaction. With a nod to Sheriff Mills, he stepped out into the crisp October evening. Adam didn't share the encounter with Rachel immediately, not wanting to mar their newfound happiness with Holloway's spite. But as they rode back to the ranch after church the following Sunday, where their engagement had been announced to general good wishes from the congregation, he decided she deserved to know. Holloway's not taking the news well, he explained, recounting the conversation in the saloon. I'm not worried about his talk, but that comment about the north pasture concerns me. Rachel frowned, considering the implications. You think he might damage our fences, try to scatter the herd? It's possible, Adam acknowledged. Men like Holloway don't accept defeat easily. Then we'll be vigilant, Rachel decided, practical as always. Perhaps speak with Sheriff Mills about our concerns, Adam nodded. Already did. He can't post a deputy at our ranch, but he'll keep an ear out for any trouble brewing. Rachel reached across the space between their horses to touch his arm. We'll face whatever comes together, Adam. We've weathered worse than James Holloway's wounded pride. Her confidence strengthened his resolve. That we have. Their vigilance proved necessary sooner than expected. 3 nights later, Adam was awakened in the bunkhouse by the sound of restless cattle. Years of range work had attuned his senses to the difference between normal bovine movement and genuine distress. This was definitely the latter. Grabbing his rifle and pulling on his boots, Adam hurried outside. The autumn night was clear and cold, stars brilliant overhead. At first he saw nothing amiss in the main yard, but the continued sounds of disturbed cattle from the north pasture propelled him in that direction. As he approached, the scent of smoke reached his nostrils. Alarm shot through him as he broke into a run, cresting the small rise that separated the ranch buildings from the north pasture. In the moonlight, he could make out flames licking at the dry grass near the fence line. Damn it, he muttered, turning back toward the ranch house. He needed help, and quickly, Rachel was already on the porch, a shawl thrown hastily over her nightgown. What is it? She called, alarmed by his rapid approach. Fire in the north pasture, Adam reported tersely. Bring buckets and blankets, I'll get the horses. They worked frantically in the darkness, riding to the pasture with water-soaked blankets and tools to dig a firebreak. The blaze was still small, but with the dry autumn grass and a light breeze, it had the potential to spread rapidly. Adam dismounted near the flames, using a shovel to dig a line of bare earth while Rachel beat at the edges of the fire with a wet blanket. Together, they managed to contain the blaze before it could threaten the cattle or spread beyond the pasture. As the last embers died under their efforts, Adam surveyed the damaged section of fence. Several posts had been weakened by the fire, and a length of wire fencing had been cut before the blaze was set. "This was deliberate," he said grimly, holding up the cleanly severed wire. Rachel, face smudged with soot and hands raw from fighting the fire, nodded in grim agreement. "Holloway can't prove it," Adam replied, "but the timing's suspicious." They repaired the fence temporarily and moved the cattle to the south pasture as a precaution before returning to the ranch house, both exhausted and filthy from their firefighting efforts. "He won't stop with this," Rachel observed as they cleaned up in the kitchen. "If Holloway's determined to drive us out, he'll try again." Adam nodded, his expression serious. "We'll need to take turns keeping watch, at least for a while, and I'll ride into town tomorrow to speak with Sheriff Mills." The sheriff was appropriately concerned when Adam reported the incident the next day, but without evidence linking Holloway directly to the fire, his hands were largely tied. "I'll have a word with him," Mills promised. "Remind him that arson and fence cutting are serious crimes in this territory." "I appreciate that," Adam said, "but I don't expect it will change much. Holloway's got too many friends and too much influence to worry about warnings." Mills sighed, acknowledging the truth of this assessment. "Best advice I can give is to stay alert and document everything. If he tries something else, we might build enough of a case to take action." For the next 2 weeks, Adam and Rachel maintained a vigilant watch over their property. They took turns staying up through the night, patrolling the boundaries of the ranch and checking on the cattle regularly. The precautions were exhausting but necessary. Twice more they discovered cut fences, though no further fires were attempted. The situation came to a head in early November when Adam caught one of Holloway's men in the act of opening a corral gate, apparently intending to scatter the horses they'd worked so hard to train. "That's far enough," Adam called, his rifle held steady as he stepped from the shadows of the barn. The man froze, then slowly raised his hands. "Just passing through," he claimed unconvincingly, "through our locked corral gate at midnight." Adam's voice was cold with controlled anger. "Try again." The would-be saboteur, a rough-looking hand Adam recognized from Holloway's ranch, shifted uncomfortably. "Look, I'm just following orders, nothing personal." "It's plenty personal from where I stand," Adam countered, gesturing with his rifle. "Start walking toward the house. Sheriff Mills will be interested in hearing about your evening activities." The confrontation woke Rachel, who emerged onto the porch with her own rifle as Adam marched the intruder into the yard. "What's happening?" she asked, immediately alert despite the late hour. "Found this one trying to turn our horses loose," Adam explained. "Thought we might invite the sheriff out for a chat with him." Rachel's expression hardened as she recognized the man. "You're Jake Turner, you work for Holloway." Turner shrugged, attempting nonchalance despite his predicament. "Lots of men work for lots of ranchers in these parts. Not many of them trespass at midnight," Rachel observed dryly. She turned to Adam. "I'll keep an eye on our guest while you fetch the sheriff." Adam hesitated, reluctant to leave her alone with the intruder. "Are you sure?" Rachel's smile held no humor as she kept her rifle trained steadily on Turner. "Quite sure." The ride to town and back with Sheriff Mills took nearly 2 hours. When they returned, they found Rachel and Turner exactly as Adam had left them, Rachel sitting calmly on the porch steps, rifle across her knees, while Turner stood uncomfortably in the yard, hands still raised. "Mighty patient of you, madam," Mills observed as he dismounted. "I've had plenty of practice with stubborn creatures, Sheriff," Rachel replied, rising gracefully despite the chill of the November night. "Though usually they have 4 legs instead of 2. Turner glowered but remained silent as Sheriff Mills questioned him about his presence on the Circle A. Despite the lawman's persistence, Turner refused to implicate Holloway directly, insisting he had been acting on his own initiative. "Thought the Anderson woman might pay for the return of her horses," he claimed sullenly. "No harm intended." Theft and extortion sound plenty harmful to me, Mills countered, securing Turner's wrists with handcuffs. You'll have time to reconsider your story from the town jail. After the sheriff had departed with his prisoner, Adam and Rachel returned to the warmth of the kitchen. Rachel put coffee on to boil, her movements efficient despite the late hour and interrupted sleep. "Do you think Turner will talk?" she asked, setting cups on the table. Adam shook his head. "Not likely. Men like that know better than to turn on their employers." "But it might be enough to make Holloway back off for a while. Or make him more determined," Rachel countered, ever practical. Adam considered this possibility as he accepted the cup she offered. "Either way, we can't keep this up indefinitely. The wedding's in 3 weeks, and we've got winter preparations to think about." Their engagement had been brief by necessity. The hard Wyoming winter would make travel difficult by December, and they wanted Rachel's aunt from Denver to be able to attend the ceremony. The church in Fort Bridger was already reserved for the last Sunday in November, a date that now seemed alarmingly close given the ongoing conflict with Holloway. Rachel sat across from him, her face thoughtful in the lamplight. "Perhaps it's time for a different approach with Holloway." Adam raised an eyebrow. "What did you have in mind?" "Negotiation," Rachel said simply. "Not about the ranch, that's non-negotiable, but perhaps there's something else Holloway wants that we might provide." Adam considered her suggestion. "Water rights to the spring on the south quarter. It would mean rerouting some of our irrigation, but it might be worth it for peace." Rachel nodded slowly. "It's a start, and perhaps grazing rights on the eastern meadow during the spring calving season. He's always complained his lower pastures flood too easily." The practical generosity of her proposal touched Adam. After all Holloway had put them through, Rachel was still willing to seek a solution that might benefit both parties. It was this combination of strength and compassion that had first drawn him to her. "It's worth trying," he agreed. Though Holloway's pride might make him difficult to approach, Rachel smiled, a determined gleam in her eye. "Then we won't approach him directly. We'll speak with his wife." Adam blinked in surprise. "Eleanor Holloway, I didn't realize you knew her." "We've served on the church aid committee together," Rachel explained. "She's a sensible woman, far more practical than her husband, and from things she's said, I gather she's tired of this feud." The strategy was unexpected but promising. Adam had encountered Eleanor Holloway only occasionally in town, but she had a reputation for quiet competence and diplomacy qualities her husband notably lacked. "It's worth a try," he conceded. "But how do we arrange it without alerting Holloway?" Rachel's smile widened. "Leave that to me." 2 days later, Rachel returned from a church planning meeting with news of progress. "Eleanor has agreed to speak with us," she reported triumphantly. "Tomorrow afternoon at the hotel restaurant in town. James will be in Cheyenne on business, so we'll have privacy." Adam was impressed but cautious. "You're sure she understands our purpose?" "Entirely," Rachel assured him. "In fact, I think she's been hoping for an opportunity like this. Eleanor wants peace as much as we do, perhaps more, given that she has to live with James's temper." The meeting the following day exceeded their cautious expectations. Eleanor Holloway proved to be not only receptive to their proposals, but had several practical suggestions of her own for resolving the conflict between the ranches. "James is stubborn and proud," she acknowledged over tea in the hotel's small dining room, "but he's not unreasonable when presented with clear benefits. The water access and spring grazing rights would be significant advantages for our operation. And in return—" Adam asked, wanting the terms to be explicit. Eleanor met his gaze directly. "In return, the hostilities end, completely. No more damaged fences, no more threats, no more disparaging comments in town." She smiled slightly. "I can't promise James will become friendly, but I can ensure he behaves like a civilized neighbor." Rachel nodded, satisfied with the terms. "We'll need this in writing, of course." "Of course," Eleanor agreed. "I'll have our lawyer draw up the agreement." James respects legal documents, if nothing else. As they prepared to depart, Eleanor touched Rachel's arm gently. "For what it's worth," she said with quiet sincerity, "I'm glad the circle has survived. Too many small ranches have been swallowed up by larger operations." It's good to see one holding its own. The unexpected support from James Holloway's wife left both Adam and Rachel feeling cautiously optimistic as they rode back to the ranch. "Do you think it will work?" Rachel asked as the circle came into view, golden in the late afternoon sunlight. Adam considered the question seriously. "I think Alina will keep her word. Whether Holloway honors her agreement remains to be seen." He glanced at Rachel, admiration evident in his expression. "But it was a brilliant strategy, approaching her instead of him. I wouldn't have thought of it." Rachel smiled, pleased by his acknowledgement. "Sometimes the direct approach isn't the most effective. My father taught me that he always said half of successful negotiation is finding the right person to negotiate with." "Your father sounds like a wise man," Adam observed. "He was," Rachel agreed, a hint of wistfulness in her voice. "He would have liked you, I think. He always valued honesty and hard work above social standing or wealth." The casual statement affected Adam more deeply than she might have realized. The approval of Rachel's family, even in memory, mattered to him. He had come to the circle as a drifter with few possessions beyond his saddle and his reputation as a reliable worker. To be accepted as a suitable partner for someone like Rachel, with her educated background and inherent gentility, felt like an honor he was still working to deserve. They rode in companionable silence for a while before Rachel spoke again. "I've been thinking about after the wedding," she said, a hint of color touching her cheeks. "About arrangements." Adam glanced at her, noting her slight embarrassment with a mixture of amusement and tenderness. For all her practical strength, Rachel still maintained certain proprieties. "What kind of arrangements?" he asked, keeping his tone neutral. "Living arrangements," she clarified. "The bunkhouse isn't suitable for the long term, especially once winter sets in properly." They had not explicitly discussed the domestic details of their married life. Both focused on the more immediate concerns of saving the ranch and planning the wedding ceremony itself. Now, with those matters somewhat settled, the practical questions of their future together could no longer be avoided. "I assumed I'd move into the main house," Adam said carefully. "Unless you had another idea," Rachel shook her head quickly. "No, that's exactly what I meant. I've been preparing the second bedroom. It was Thomas's study, but I've cleared it out and moved in a proper bed." She glanced at him, a question in her eyes. "Unless you'd prefer," she trailed off, unable to voice the more intimate alternative directly. Adam understood her hesitation. Remarriage after widowhood was practical and accepted on the frontier, but certain aspects remained private matters. "I think separate rooms would be best, at first," he said gently, sparing her the need to be more explicit. "We've built our partnership on respect. That doesn't need to change just because we're adding marriage to the arrangement." Relief and something like disappointment mingled in Rachel's expression. "You're right, of course," she agreed. "It's the sensible approach." Adam reached across the space between their horses to touch her hand briefly. "Rachel, there's no hurry for any aspect of this. We have time to figure out who we are together in all ways." Her smile returned, grateful for his understanding. "Thank you, Adam." The days leading up to the wedding passed in a flurry of activity. Winter preparations for the ranch consumed most of their daylight hours. Hay needed storing, buildings required weatherproofing, livestock had to be moved to sheltered pastures. In the evenings, Rachel attended to the details of the ceremony and the small reception to follow at the ranch. True to Alina's word, the legal agreement regarding water and grazing rights arrived 4 days after their meeting. More surprisingly, it bore not only her signature but James Holloway's as well. The document was fair, clearly worded, and provided the circle with the peace they had sought. "I'm still not entirely convinced," Adam admitted as they filed the agreement with the county clerk in Fort Bridger. Holloway gave in too easily. The clerk, overhearing this comment, looked up from his ledger. "If you're referring to James Holloway, I wouldn't call it giving in," he remarked. "Word is the bank in Cheyenne called in some of his loans. He's had to sell off part of his southern range to cover them." This news shed new light on Holloway's unexpected cooperation. A rancher facing financial pressure of his own would be more inclined to accept practical advantages like water access and grazing rights rather than continue a costly feud. That explains a few things, Adam observed as they left the clerk's office. Holloway's been living beyond his means for years, according to what I've heard in town. All that expensive breeding stock and fancy equipment has to be paid for eventually. Rachel nodded thoughtfully. It makes our agreement even more valuable to him then. He needs those water rights more than he needs revenge. The realization that their most persistent threat had been neutralized, at least temporarily, allowed them to focus fully on final wedding preparations. Rachel's aunt, Margaret Pierce, arrived from Denver 3 days before the ceremony, bringing with her a trunk of household items as a wedding gift: fine linens, silver flatware, and several books for the ranch's modest library. Aunt Margaret, a handsome widow in her 50s with the same direct gaze as her niece, took Adam's measure with unabashed scrutiny upon their introduction. "So you're the cowboy who's been helping Rachel save the ranch," she observed, offering her hand with brisk courtesy. "Yes, madam," Adam replied, meeting her evaluating look steadily. Margaret nodded, apparently satisfied with what she saw. "Good. She needed someone with backbone. Thomas was a dear man, but too cautious by half." She turned to Rachel with a fond smile. "This one looks like he might keep up with you, my dear." Rachel laughed, the sound warm with genuine happiness. "He manages quite well, Aunt Margaret." The older woman's presence added a welcome, familial element to the wedding preparations. She took charge of the house, allowing Rachel and Adam to complete the necessary ranch work without neglecting the domestic arrangements for the ceremony. Under Margaret's capable direction, the ranch house was thoroughly cleaned, decorated with pine boughs and the last preserved flowers from Rachel's garden, and prepared to receive the small group of guests invited to the reception. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and cold, the late November sky a brilliant blue above the frosted landscape. Adam rose early in the bunkhouse, taking extra care with his appearance. He had purchased a new suit for the occasion, his first ever, and felt somewhat constricted by the formal clothing after months in practical work attire. Rachel had insisted he use the main house to prepare, but Adam had declined, wanting to maintain the traditional separation of bride and groom before the ceremony. It was one of the few conventional aspects of their unconventional courtship that seemed worth preserving. Sheriff Mills arrived mid-morning to drive Adam to the church in town, bringing with him a flask of whiskey and words of encouragement. "Married life suits some men better than others," he observed as they set out in his buggy. "But I reckon you and Rachel Anderson have already worked out most of the kinks that trouble newlyweds." Adam smiled at this practical assessment. "We've had plenty of practice solving problems together," he agreed. "That's more than most couples can say on their wedding day," Mills noted with approval. "Usually takes years to develop that kind of partnership." The church was modestly decorated with evergreen branches and white ribbons when they arrived. Reverend Taylor greeted them at the door, ushering Adam to the small anteroom to wait while the handful of guests were seated. "Nervous?" the Reverend inquired kindly, noting Adam's slight restlessness. Adam considered the question seriously. "Not about marrying Rachel," he replied honestly. "Just about doing right by her, I suppose." Reverend Taylor nodded, understanding the deeper concern beneath the simple words. "From what I've observed these past months, Mr. James, you've already demonstrated your commitment to doing right by Mrs. Anderson. Today simply formalizes what has already been established through your actions." The minister's perspective eased some of the tension Adam hadn't fully acknowledged to himself. This wasn't a beginning so much as a continuation, a public affirmation of the bond he and Rachel had already forged through shared work, shared purpose, and growing affection. When the time came for him to take his place at the altar, Adam moved with a calm certainty that surprised him. The church was filled with familiar faces, neighbors who had helped during difficult times, townspeople who had extended credit when needed, ranch hands who had worked alongside them during branding and roundup. Even James and Eleanor Holloway were present, seated near the back, a gesture of community reconciliation that Adam recognized as significant. Eleanor caught his eye briefly and offered a small nod of acknowledgement, which Adam returned with equal gravity. The simple melody of Amazing Grace, played on the church's small organ, signaled Rachel's arrival. Adam turned, and the sight of her in the doorway made his breath catch in his throat. Rachel wore a dress of deep blue silk, not the traditional white of first-time brides, but a color that brought out the richness of her chestnut hair and the vivid blue of her eyes. Aunt Margaret had arranged that hair in an elegant style, adorned with small white flowers, and Rachel carried a simple bouquet of evergreen sprigs and dried roses from her garden. She walked down the aisle alone, her chin high and her steps steady, a woman making her own choice rather than being given away. Adam found the gesture profoundly moving, a testament to Rachel's independence and strength, even as she chose to join her life with his. When she reached his side, Rachel's smile held a private warmth meant only for him. Adam extended his hand, and she placed hers in it without hesitation. Reverend Taylor's ceremony was brief but meaningful, acknowledging Rachel's previous marriage with respect while celebrating the new bond being formed. The traditional vows took on deeper significance given all they had already endured together, for better, for worse, and in sickness and in health were not abstract concepts but lived realities for them both. When Adam slipped the simple gold band onto Rachel's finger, his hands were steady and sure. When Rachel spoke her vows in return, her voice carried clearly through the small church, confident and unwavering. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," Reverend Taylor declared, beaming at the couple before him. "What God has joined together, let no man put asunder." Adam leaned down to seal their union with a kiss that balanced public propriety with genuine emotion. As they turned to face their friends and neighbors, now officially introduced as Mr. and Mrs. James, Adam felt a sense of completion he had never experienced before. The reception at the Circle was a jovial affair, with tables set up in the ranch yard to take advantage of the unusually mild November day. Neighbors had contributed dishes to supplement the feast Rachel and Aunt Margaret had prepared, creating a bountiful spread that reflected the community's support for the newlyweds. Adam found himself accepting congratulations and good-natured advice from men who had known him only as a hired hand months earlier. Rachel moved through the gathering with natural grace, her new status as Mrs. James sitting comfortably on her shoulders alongside her continued identity as the determined woman who had saved the Circle ranch. Even James Holloway approached them, offering a stiffly formal congratulation before adding with grudging respect, "You've done well with the place." "Better than I expected." "Thank you, Mr. Holloway," Rachel replied, her smile polite but reserved. "We're looking forward to being good neighbors." Holloway nodded, an unspoken truce acknowledged in the simple exchange. As he moved away, Adam squeezed Rachel's hand in silent appreciation of her diplomacy. As the afternoon waned and guests began to depart, Aunt Margaret took charge of clearing away the remains of the feast, insisting that the newlyweds should be relieved of hosting duties. "I'll stay through tomorrow to help set things to rights," she declared firmly. "You two have earned an evening of peace." When the last guest had gone and Aunt Margaret had retreated to the guest room with pointed references to her early bedtime, Adam and Rachel found themselves alone in the main room of the ranch house for the first time as husband and wife. "Well, Mrs. James," Adam said softly, the name still new and wonderful on his tongue. "It seems we've managed to pull off another successful venture together." Rachel smiled, her eyes bright with happiness and perhaps a hint of shyness. "Indeed we have, Mr. James." The formality of their address to each other, a playful acknowledgement of their new status, broke the slight tension that had developed as they navigated this transition from partnership to marriage. Rachel laughed and Adam joined her, the sound of their shared mirth filling the ranch house that had seen so much hardship and determination. "It feels different," Rachel observed when their laughter had subsided. "Being here as your wife instead of your employer or partner." "Better different or just different?" Adam asked, genuinely curious about her perspective. Rachel considered the question thoughtfully. "Better, I think, more complete somehow." Adam nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. "Like we've finally acknowledged what's been true for some time." "Yes," Rachel agreed, her smile softening. "Exactly like that." The moment stretched between them, comfortable yet charged with new awareness. Finally, Adam held out his hand in a gesture that mirrored their first meeting months ago beside Thomas's grave. "Shall we rebuild our home, Rachel James?" He asked quietly. Rachel placed her hand in his without hesitation, her eyes shining with promise. "We already have, Adam, but I look forward to seeing what else we can create together." As winter settled over Wyoming territory, the Circle Ranch entered a new phase of existence. The partnership that had saved it from failure evolved into a marriage that strengthened it further. Rachel and Adam established routines and traditions that honored the ranch's past while embracing its future under their joint stewardship. Separate bedrooms gave way to shared quarters as their relationship deepened from respect and affection to genuine passion. The practical arrangement they had initially envisioned transformed organically into a love match that surprised them both with its intensity and comfort. Spring brought renewal to the land and to the ranch operations. Calving season was successful beyond their hopes, with healthy new stock increasing their herd substantially. The garden Rachel planted was twice the size of the previous years, providing abundant produce for their table and extra to sell in town. By summer, the improvements they had implemented began to show tangible results. The Circle was becoming known for its well-managed stock and fair business practices. When cattle buyers came through Fort Bridger, the James Ranch was now on their list of preferred suppliers. Autumn marked their first anniversary both of Thomas's passing and of Adam's arrival at the ranch. They acknowledged these milestones with quiet reflection, grateful for the journey that had brought them together despite its painful beginnings. "I never expected to find happiness again so soon," Rachel admitted as they sat on the porch one evening, watching the sunset paint the distant mountains. "Sometimes I feel almost guilty for how complete my life feels with you." Adam took her hand, understanding the complex emotions behind her words. "Thomas would want you to be happy, Rachel. He loved this land and he loved you. Seeing both flourish would give him peace." Rachel nodded, leaning against his shoulder. "I know, and I've made my peace with that truth." She placed their joined hands over her slightly rounded belly where the first evidence of new life was beginning to show. "I think Thomas would be pleased to know his legacy continues, even if in a different way than he might have imagined." The news of Rachel's pregnancy, confirmed just 2 weeks earlier, had filled them both with wonder and renewed purpose. The child, expected in early spring, would be the first James to be born on the Circle, a tangible symbol of the new beginning they had forged from tragedy. "Our child will know the story," Adam promised, his voice husky with emotion. How this land was claimed and loved by Thomas Anderson, how his widow refused to surrender it when others thought she should, and how together we rebuilt what had been broken. Rachel smiled, contentment evident in every line of her face. "Our home," she murmured. "Built stronger for having been nearly lost." As darkness fell over the Wyoming landscape, the lights of the Circle Ranch glowed warm and steady against the gathering night, a beacon of resilience, partnership, and love rebuilt from the ashes of loss. Inside, a man and woman who had found each other through shared adversity prepared to welcome the future they had created together, secure in the knowledge that what they had built would endure.